get any further, let us start out by introducing one of my fantastic Squawk Ident co-hosts. He is a former international professional racquetball champion, a member of the 9G Club, an AMP and avionics tech, an RC aircraft commander, and a 737 pilot for Legacy Airlines. From his fortress of isolation from somewhere in Flower Mound, Texas, where he is recovering from a long week of flying with Jerry Springer guests from around the country. For those of you too young to know who Jerry Springer is, look up Phil Donahue and prepare to get woke. Please help me welcome you back to the show, RobD. Rob, how the heck are you?
What's up, Tony? I'm doing really good. How you doing?
I'm doing pretty good, man. So, crazy week.
Yes.
Been busy, which,
Me
is
too.
always a blessing, I think. What have you been up to?
Yeah. Well, I've been busy too. Flew a 3-day trip, and it was a pretty good trip operationally. No delays really to speak of. Started off on the first day, which was Tuesday. We flew DFW to Phoenix, and got to Phoenix fairly early. Got there about 10 o'clock in the morning, so I had all day to kill. So nothing really crazy, just went out for a walk and got some exercise in, and then me and the captain joined up for dinner, and we went and had dinner at Garcia's, which is a really good restaurant in Phoenix, Mexican restaurant. Been around for, I think it's close to 30 or 40 years. So if anytime you're in the Phoenix area, actually, I think they have them out there in California too. They're called Garcia's. Excellent margaritas, by the way. So that was a good overnight. Great meal. Great conversations with my captain. The next day, we did a Vegas turn, and went after we got back to Phoenix. We did Phoenix to St. Louis. Quick overnight in St. Louis. Nothing to speak of there. No real surprises on any of the flights that day. Got to St. Louis, spent the night there, and then the last day, the third day, which was Thursday. Yesterday, we flew from St. Louis to Dallas, and then we did a Mexico City turn. And Mexico City is it's pretty hazy down there, and a lot of terrain. I think you've been down there before, but it was still pretty slow, aviation wise. There wasn't that much traffic going in there. I heard a couple of the Mexican carriers flying in. I think United was flying in there, and I think I heard a FedEx guy also going in at the same time. But usually, that's a really busy airport, and it didn't sound that busy that day. But on the way back, it got a little interesting coming back into Dallas. Not sure if you're ready to talk about it, but it was just, getting back, headed back to Dallas. We were working on probably the 5th, 6th hour of our 8-hour flying day. So, we're pretty much on the backside of the power curve as far as energy level goes. And we had just crossed over the border and checked on with Houston Center, and they gave us a different arrival than what we were cleared. So in DFW, the RNAV arrivals are pretty much set up predicated on the direction or the flow of the arriving aircraft into DFW, whether it be a north flow or a south flow. So when we first got cleared into DFW, we had a north flow arrival, and we got checked in with Houston. They gave us a different arrival for a south flow. So, me and the captain looked at each other. We pulled up the latest weather report, the ATIS, and it says they were still in a north flow. So I queried the controller. I said, "Hey, are they switching the airport around?" And they're like, "Well, they haven't done it yet, but they're getting ready to, and that's why we're issuing you the new revised arrival clearance." So we're like, "Okay." So we programmed the computer, the FMC, the flight mode computer for the new arrival to reflect the change of runway operations in Dallas. And as soon as we checked on with Fort Worth Center, which is the controllers that work all the arrivals into Dallas, they said, "Hey, advise when you're ready to copy holding instructions."
Nice.
Dun, dun, done. So of course, we're just like, man, this is the last thing we need. is a hold. Usually when they turn the airport around, it really is pretty quick, and you rarely have to hold because they can space out the aircraft with with the way that the traffic has been lately, pretty light. But Dallas being one of the busiest airports in the world, we're still operating at a pretty high capacity right now. So they issued us a hold, and so we went into a hold. And we started off at the hold at like 32,000 feet, and we descended down to 24,000 feet, and we held there for, it was about 5 minutes while they turned the airport around.
Yeah.
And finally, we were getting ready to query them because we didn't really have that much time to hold. We had about 10 minutes of holding fuel on board. And so right when I was about to ask them, hey, how long is this hold going to be? Actually, I forgot to tell you, they gave us an EFC time, which I don't know if those aviators out there know what that stands for. It's instrument words for expect further clearance. So basically, it's a time that we can expect another clearance from the controller. And they give you that time basically for contingency purposes, like if you lose radio comms while you're in the hold. This EFC time is a hard time that the controllers give you. If you lose comm, you can now proceed from your holding fix and continue on your route to your destination, so that you're not holding indefinitely and wondering what you should do if you can't talk to anybody. So anyway, EFC time. So we were coming upon our EFC time, which was about 10 minutes, which was about the time, as much time, like I said, we had in holding fuel. And when I began to query the controller, he's like, you're cleared direct to this fix and continue on the arrival. So we were pretty relieved about that because as you know, Tony, we're regulated with flight time and duty time and all that stuff, and already coming up on 8 hours of flying that day, we were pretty much right up against our limitation. So if we would have diverted, it would have most likely meant that it would have been the final flight of the day.
Yeah,
we wouldn't be able to continue. Yeah, so we were able to continue back into Dallas, landed uneventfully, and taxied on into the gate, cleared customs, and off I went. And so that was my week. It was I forget how many hours we flew, but I know yesterday was 8 hours plus of flying. 8 hours and 10 minutes, and did a total of 16 hours and 8 minutes in 3 short days. So
wow,
pretty good.
That's very good. And you brought up some really great points, and I'd like to dive into these a little bit more.
Yeah.
Number one, most importantly, when you drink or order a margarita, do you do salt on the rim or no salt?
That's a good question. Some people do sugar too, right? Have you heard of that?
Like the strawberry margaritas, they do sugar.
Yeah. I do salt.
You do the salt.
I like the salt.
And do you blend it or do you do cube?
Well, these came blended. Some people like them on the rocks. Yeah. These were frozen. They were good, man. I mean, I only had one. I'm not much of a drinker, so one is all I need, and I really enjoyed it. It was one and done. But yeah, me too. That's what the captain says. Like, I'll bring you out to dinner anytime because this is a cheap dinner for me. So, but yeah, it was good, man. I really enjoyed it. Normally, I don't normally have an alcoholic beverage for dinner. That's just not my first choice, So, but this one just the right time, right place. It was good.
Hot
it was really
summer
good.
Evening, or lunch.
Yeah, it was really dry out there. Yeah.
So let's dive into what happened. So you flew a week, 3 days of flying basically, and on your trip you've had a pretty you've had what I would say is like a regular trip. No major events, no delays, major delays of any kind. You stayed within the parameters of your original schedule. But you did come up against a couple barriers. One was your flight time, duty time periods. You mentioned you flew a little bit over 8 hours, which now, depending on what your start time is for the day, with FAR 117, which is the
Right.
Federal Aviation regulation that regulates rest requirements for pilots, and which is all encompassing with duty time and flight time. So you have to look at your home base time, and you have to look at what time you started that day, regardless of
Right.
where you are in the country or in the world. And you have to figure out, okay, how much rest did I get? What time am I starting? And you go through the charts that they have, and you can look these up.
Right.
You can Google these things relatively easily, and you see your limit's like 9 hours.
Right.
Right? So for you, for that day, your limit was 9 hours, and you were blocked to fly 8 hours and 10 minutes. So you had a 50-minute buffer. Now, if on that very first leg that you flew for the day, that got delayed in the air, and you went over an hour delay in the air, so you flew an hour longer than scheduled, they would have had to have removed you from the other legs potentially. Right. And then you'd be stuck somewhere to get your mandatory rest before you can come back, usually with a deadhead or something. So you were getting pretty close.
Yeah.
But what I'd like to focus on a little bit is your holding. Now, for those people out there that may not be everyday aviators or haven't started their instrument training yet, that is something that is kind of scary for someone who's a private pilot and they just got their PPL and they're like, oh, now I'm ready to go study my instruments. And they realize that, you get a taste of it during your private pilot training. But then once you really start diving into the rules and regulations, you realize that everything is set up for a reason. You mentioned EFCs, which I'd like to talk a little bit about. And you mentioned switching their airports around. So let's talk about the airports.
Okay.
So you were coming in from the south, obviously, from Mexico City, which is another topic. If we have time, we'll kind of get into that. But and they gave you an arrival that was not what you had filed. So
Correct.
The first red flag went up. And you queried ATC and said, hey, okay, what's going on? And they explained it to you. When they give you a holding clearance, do you recall what it was?
Yeah, it was. And I actually, before I dive into that, one little minor detail that I miss, which really doesn't, it plays into the big scheme of things, but I kind of overlooked it, was when we checked on and they gave us the revised arrival, as they said, slow to your slowest practical speed.
Ah, yeah, that's a good one.
And that's a good one too, right? And going on to, it will probably lead into, add more detail to the discussion, but obviously that is to provide more time for them to turn the airplane around as we approach the airport. So we slowed down to, I think it was 220 knots was our slowest speed at that altitude. So
yeah. And how do you get that with the swept wing jet aircraft? Do you just arbitrarily slow to a particular speed?
Right.
Is there like an indicator on your airspeed? I know on the bus there's a green dot, which is
green dot. Yeah.
Speed possible in that configuration.
Yeah. So we don't have a green dot. I think we have what we call an up bug, but that up bug is honestly, I believe that is only for takeoff and drift down stuff. Honestly, I need to review the books on that. I'm sorry, but we on our airspeed indicator, probably like the Airbus, we have low speed awareness and overspeed awareness symbols on it. So what we normally do is give ourselves about a 10 knot buffer on the low speed awareness indicator, so that obviously you don't want to go slower than the low speed awareness, because then you start triggering a whole bunch of alarms on there. So 220 at the altitude that we were at was about the right airspeed for that. And we also have in the FMC selections for flight management computer for like long range cruise. It'll give you recommended holding speeds, which we always add a buffer to that, because usually the recommended holding speed is like right at that low speed awareness tape. So it's kind of like, well, yeah, you can go down to here, but if you go below it, you start triggering all kinds of alerts and stuff like that. So we always stay above that. So yeah, that's I don't know if we answered the original question, but yeah, that's what it was.
Yeah. And so you slow to your speed. And that also makes sense. And I don't know if you kind of scratched the surface on this, but all right, so you're en route and all of a sudden ATC says you can expect holding. If they haven't given it to you,
correct.
I believe, you and I have talked about this before. The first thing you should query the air traffic controller is, can we slow to a speed at our discretion?
That's right.
Because why are you in a hurry to get to a holding fix and turn in circles for an hour where maybe you can slow down and slow to a more practical,
efficient,
slow
fuel efficient?
Yeah. And now when you finally get to that holding fix, maybe by then you may not have to hold at all.
Exactly.
So
that's the whole theory.
Yeah. So you slowed. They gave you the holding instructions, and that's what I was asking. So they probably said legacy, 1, 2, 3. What was your clearance? Do you remember?
Yeah. So the initial call was legacy 1, 2, 3, advise and ready to copy holding instructions, and we're like, okay, stand by, and we got a pen and paper out. Opened up the arrival chart so that we can reference the fixes on the chart, and they said, all right, you're cleared directly to the Kilo intersection. Hold over Kilo as published. Descend and maintain flight level 240. EFC is 2105. So I read back the clearance, cleared direct to Kilo, descend to 240. Hold is published, EFC 2105. So built the hold in the compute in the FMC. Went direct to the hold. We were at 34,000 feet at that time, I believe, or 35,000, and we descended. As we made our way to the hold, we were still above 24,000 feet when we entered the hold, and we descended from like 30,000 feet down to 24,000 feet and held at the Kilo intersection for, it was about 10 minutes. Yep.
Yeah. So you descended in as soon as you crossed that holding fix. Now you have to verify it's sterile cockpit at that point, because both pilots are very focused on making sure that the airplane's doing what you anticipate.
Exactly.
Yeah. So now you've entered the hold. You can see that the your MFD or your MD changes. Now there's a hold depicted that is now activated, and the little airplane on your moving map display starts to turn. You're like, okay, I'm entered the hold. So
exactly,
you got a time, tune, twist, throttle, talker, right? I think that's what the GA.
Right. Turn, or tune, time, twist, throttle, talk. Yeah, all that.
Like that. Yeah.
The
so
TTTs.
Yeah. TC. Yeah, we've entered the hold, and
as
you're descending through there and into your.
One of the required reports.
Required report. Yeah. And so now you're holding, and the passengers in the back, they know this, right? Because they feel the airplane going in a circle. It's always like leaning to the right or leaning to the left. Usually the captain turns on the seatbelt sign, makes a PA, lets them know what's going on, has to notify the flight attendants what's happening, because the flight attendants, they do this for a living. They know, oh crap, why are we holding? There's no weather. Why are we holding? And it takes time for the aircraft operations to reverse the flow. So you have maybe 5 or 6 airplanes coming in to land in the south direction. And now you have to wait until that very last airplane lands, clears the runway, before you can start letting airplanes come in into the north direction, landing north.
Exactly.
So that's why you're holding, because you're kind of waiting for this, protected area to be cleared, so you don't have 2 airplanes pointed at each other.
Exactly.
Now, when this happens, this doesn't just affect the airport operations. This affects operations downstream all the way through somebody who might be on the ground at a particular airport.
That's right.
Now there's no weather and they're taxiing out. Maybe I'm in Vegas ready to go to DFW, and they're like, yeah, there's flow into DFW. Your EFC is or your edict time, estimated departure clearance time. Your edict time is now 20 minutes from now, and you're like, what the hell is going on? Why?
The weather's beautiful out there. Why would they do that?
Every time I leave Vegas, this is the crap they pull. Well, it's because it's all happening like a domino effect downstream. Now, by the time you take off, you're going to be able to catch up, no problem. It's not. Or
basically, they fill in the gaps as you get airborne as they can. Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot to this, and in the airplane, we're doing more than sipping coffee and reading news. Cruise. pushing that cruise button on that autopilot. I don't think so.
Most people don't realize, I mean, when you are issued a holding clearance, it gets pretty busy up in the cockpit. I mean, there's certain things, and you already alluded to most of it, when we have to talk to the passengers, talk to the flight attendants. Of course, the required report to ATC is there. And also we let our dispatchers know what's happening too, so that they're in the loop. Most likely they're already in the loop, but they definitely love, or I think it's required that we contact them with the information that we've received from ATC, so that they can monitor our progress. And more importantly, the whole reason we do this is basically for safety. We want to make sure we track our fuel burn, because as you all know, or most of us know, we don't carry full tanks of gas around all day long. We only plan to arrive at the airport with a certain amount of fuel, and we have contingency fuel, which is usually 45 minutes past our destination or our alternate airport, and then a little bit of contingency fuel for holding, which in our case we ended up using, and that's it. So once you burn through that contingency fuel, you need to be going to an airport to land, whether it be your destination or your alternate. So that was a long way of just saying we're busy up there monitoring and calculating our bingo fuel. Bingo is a aviation buzzword for lowest amount of fuel we need to have in the tanks before we start going somewhere. So we end up departing the hold safely and getting to where we need to be.
I need to pull out my metal E6B and pull that out. And next time I enter a hold, I'm gonna look to the captain and be like, "Don't worry, I got this."
So it's 4.1. Is that 41 that I use?
Yeah,
that's fun stuff, man. That all works. It all applies today.